On today's episode of the Regression to the Mean podcast, we have 6 players that we refuse to draft during this fantasy football best ball draft season. My name is Shaun Moran, and I am joined by my co-hosts, my good friends, and my fellow knowers of ball, Keegan Thompson and Aidan Holler. Boys, you ready to dive in? Ready to talk fades?
Let's do it. Let's do it. There's gonna be some mean comments, but we're doing it. Someone's got to do it. We're trying to help you out here. So no. Unlocked and loaded.
Keegan, just don't talk shit on Drake London and we're fine, right? We'll survive if we don't say anything mean about Drake London.
Yeah, just
goodness.
No ripping on the average wide receiver 32 or else we'll get mean comments.
Yeah, Drake London's about to go off this year. He's about to go off this year. He might even crack the top 30. Format for today's episode is pretty simple. We each have 2 guys that we have little to no exposure to in best ball this summer, and we're going to go through each player in ADP order. I'm going to start things off here with a player that my fellow co-hosts vehemently disagreed with. I think we were chatting like a couple Saturday nights ago just in the chat, and I was kind of on an island here. I was even being accused of take lock, which is not good. And the guy that I'm fading here is none other than Saqoun Barkley. And I swear this is not for engagement, folks. I legit have 0 shares of Saqoun this offseason. No. Please confirm with the people, boys, that this is serious. I have 0 shares of Saqoun Barkley. Can we confirm here before we move forward with the case against Saqoun?
No. It's crazy, but it's true. It's crazy, but it is true.
Okay. This isn't for engagement. Even though he's on the thumbnail, thank you for clicking and watching. My bear case against Saqoun Barkley, who's ADP 20 and who's the RB6 currently right now, is the fact that even though he is going from a bad situation from the New York Giants to a better situation with the Eagles, I don't think it's marginally that different. I'd rather take wide receivers in the area that he's going, and I'd flat out rather have Devon Achane over Saqoun Barkley straight up. So that's why I'm not getting a lot of Saqoun Barkley. But when you're trying to build an analytical case against Saqoun, he was good in 2023. He had an elite fantasy role. He accounted for 75% of the Giants' high-value touches, which buoyed him to an RB13 finish. However, his overall efficiency metrics were down in 2023 compared to 2022. Was that because he played one of the worst offenses in football? Probably. Or was it because, he was asked to carry a heavy workload and he broke down later in the year? It's probably a little bit of both, right? So he's going to the Eagles. It's a much better situation. His efficiency will go up. But I'm just a little reticent about switching teams at the age of 27 because there's just not a lot of historical precedent for these guys coming out and really smashing. Since 2010, there have only been 30 seasons where a running back over the age of 27 has cleared 16 plus fantasy points per game. Only 9 of those seasons came from a player who didn't draft them. CMC, LaShawn McCoy, Raheem Mostert, DeMarco Murray, Darren Sproles, Reggie Bush, Mark Ingram. Those are good names. Saqoun definitely belongs in that list. But again, not a lot of precedent. Only a 30% hit rate that he clears over 16 fantasy points per game. I think his role is going to be better and it's going to be good in 2024. I'm confident about that. But is his role really marginally better than, say, Joe Mixon? Joe Mixon's going 3 rounds later. They're both elite offenses. They're both going to get a ton of workload. They're both going to score a ton of touchdowns. Joe Mixon's had better PPR RB finishes over the past 3 years than Saqoun. So, I could just get Joe Mixon in round 5 or 6, and they're very similar to Saqoun. One makes you feel a certain way, but I don't know, man. Again, I'd rather take a wide receiver in Achane and go take a Mixon or someone later on. What do you guys think? Am I crazy here?
Yes. Dude, if Saqoun Barkley was on the Cincinnati Bengals the last 3 seasons, we're talking top 3 fantasy. That's 15 touchdowns. I'd almost pencil in. The Joe Mixon role has been so cush. And I know I'm just picking one part of your argument, but I love Saquon's role. I think, Saqoun is getting into a significantly better role. He's not going to have to bear such a burden that he did in New York, being the only capable person in that offense. So I think I understand the argument of going wide receiver in that range, but I think with best ball, you kind of want to mix it up a little bit. So I've done plenty of drafts where I've taken Saqoun in those kind of late teens around 20, and I've also done plenty where I pass on him and go for wide receiver. So it's not someone that I'm going to be 20-25% plus exposure on, but it's someone that I'm definitely targeting. I think I'm super excited about him. And he's also got pop week potential. He's got an RB1 finish. He's got another top 5 RB finish in terms of, overall fantasy seasons. the precedent of people changing teams and not scoring, like I get that, but how many of them have like, multiple top 5 RB finishes in their career? I think it's a very unique case that I think will kind of buck that trend this year.
Yeah, I think Aidan makes a lot of good points there. Saquon is not a lot of these other running backs, so we can look at historical data that have switched teams, especially later on in their careers, into year 6, 7, 8. We definitely start seeing some running back fall off, especially when they change teams. But we're talking about Saqoun Barkley going from the New York Giants to arguably the best offensive line unit in the NFL, or at least projected to be the best offensive line unit in the NFL.
Top three,
yeah, sure. Whatever you want to say. That's far better than any situation he's ever had. Plus, in New York, when Saquon goes out there, of course he's going to bear the workload. They didn't have anybody outside of Saquon since they've had Odell on the team, minus a one good season from Daniel Jones. So just by simple math, more scoring opportunities for Saquon equals a better offensive outlook for him in fantasy production. There was a point this summer in best ball drafts where you could have paired up CD and Saquon, and you were drafting at that point, Shaun, and you just didn't click Saquon. Like, that is a fantastic start to a draft.
I went with Devonta Smith over Saquon for receiver builds. So I get it. The Eagles are a huge upgrade, but Saquon was the offense. Like, everything ran through him. He had so many touches. So I think that though he'll go and be in a more efficient offense, he'll see, I think, less touches, for sure, less receptions. He's going to get way less targets from Jalen Hurts, who's a running quarterback. So I think you see something comparable to what he did in New York. I think you're drafting him at a ceiling right there, honestly. And in redraft, he's going to be a top 12 pick. I have no interest in that whatsoever. So I get it. This one could burn me. He could have his CMC moment, but I don't know, man. I don't know. Before we move on to the next guy, 2 things. If you are a part of the 70% of people watching this video that have not yet subscribed to the Regression to the Mean podcast, you know what to do. Like this video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on the notifications to make sure you aren't missing any of the content that we are dropping weekly. And 2, if you love fantasy football and you want to compete for a chance at $1.5 million, you need to be drafting on Underdog this summer. If you download the app and sign up using promo code RTM, the good people over at Underdog will double your deposit up to $100. Drafting on Underdog is my personal favorite way to get prepped and ready for my home leagues, while also allowing me to compete in a ton of different contests for big cash prizes. All right, boys, moving on to our next guy. Aidan, tell us why you're fading a year 2 breakout potential wide receiver, being drafted as the wide receiver 26 at ADP 36. Why are you out on Zay Flowers?
Year 2. You even hit me with the year 2 guilt trip to try to get me to back down. The reason I'm fading Zay Flowers is not because I don't like him. I just think the price is way too rich. Like you said, ADP is 36, wide receiver 21, wide receiver 26. Just finished his rookie season as the wide receiver 29 in similar format. So was just under 900 yards, 5 total touchdowns, led his team in targets. Pretty productive season. Mark Andrews is going to be back this year. You've still got Rashad Bateman in the mix. Just drafted Tez Walker. And it's really twofold here. One is, like, the passing attack really isn't the focal point in this Baltimore offense. This team just led the league in rushing, had the second most amount of rushing touchdowns, and just signed, one of the best running backs of our generation in Derrick Henry. There's really no telling that, the passing touchdowns and the passing uptick is going to increase for Lamar. I think kind of what we saw last year is probably about what we're going to see again this year. I think, it worked really well for them, pretty balanced, absolutely, just hammer the rock, they get in the red zone, and, they score on the ground. So I think at the end of the day, like, that's a huge issue for me. And with Zay too, it's just, it's not a lot of pop. It's not a lot of pop. He had 6 games over double digits in half PPR scoring. It was just kind of consistently just hanging out around, just below 10 half PPR points. So it's just not a lot of, slate breaking scores, which you want in best ball. You want those big pop weeks, you want those big spike weeks. And then just looking around some of the other wide receivers that are drafted in the same range, like, this is really the main reason I'm out on him. Like, I'd be happy with Zay Flowers, another probably 5 or 10 wide receivers down. You've got Michael Pittman and Tank Dell before him, who I'd absolutely take over Zay Flowers. And then the couple guys behind him, I would take all but one: George Pickens, Amari Cooper, T. Higgins, Christian Kirk, and Terry McLaurin. those are all guys that are, the absolute one in their offenses that I think, have a much more established role that I would prefer over Zay Flowers. I just don't see his wide receiver 29 finish from last year really increasing all that much. I kind of see that as his ceiling again, which is fine. I think that's, very productive, but in this scoring format in best ball, it's, doesn't move the needle for me. Like, those guys excite me a whole lot more than Zay Flowers this year. You love Zay Flowers, so I got to know why are you exposing yourself to Zay?
Wow, yeah, he's one of my most drafted players. I'm in on Zay for a couple of reasons. One, I think the Ravens pass more in 2024. Their world-beating defense probably regresses after losing a ton of defenders that were really good to free agency. So I think they pass more. He has a really strong RP profile, reception perception. He was 90th percentile as a rookie against zone. That's some pretty rarefied company, especially as a rookie. He feasted on digs, curls, and posts, and he's nasty after the catch. We want guys in the intermediate of the field catching the ball over the middle for yak opportunities. Minimum 50 targets. He had the 4th best missed tackles forced per reception. And he was top 24 in first read target share as a rookie. I just think he gets better. This offense passes more, and he established himself as a true wide receiver 1 in this offense. So I went in on Zay. I think he scores more touchdowns too. Keegan, you're the deciding vote here. Yay or nay on Zay?
I kind of hear both sides, right? Like
What's your
Zay
exposure
Flowers,
to Zay Flowers? What is your exposure to Mr. Flowers?
It's pretty low because he is such a rich asset cost. But I think to say he's not the bona fide number 1 wide receiver is not true. To Shaun's point, he is the number 1 wide receiver. Odell's gone. We are planning
wide receiver, yes, but passing option
that matters.
Option. Mark Andrews is still there.
Look, the way I cut it, the way I slice it, if you look at somebody like T. Higgins, who you mentioned, he's not the number 1 option, but he'll be out there on the field a ton.
Yeah. I said all but one. I would still draft Zay over T, everyone that I mentioned.
Tank Dell has 2 other really great wide receivers to compete with.
CJ Stroud's going to throw for 1,000 more yards than Lamar Jackson, though.
You're banking on that, though. DJ Moore, who's slightly higher, will also be in a very competitive 3 wide receiver environment, and he's boosted up above all of them. I'm not saying it's comparable.
DJ Moore. We're thumbs up on DJ Moore over Zay Flowers.
I'm not saying it's comparable, but everybody has blemishes in this range. I don't think you can.
It's a rich range. It's a great range of wide receivers. So
George Pickens has Russell Wilson and potentially Justin Fields throwing the ball.
Yeah.
He probably can still eat because he did it with Kenny Pickett. But everybody has blemishes in this range. I don't think it's fair to completely fade him, but he is very expensive right now.
Yeah, I've got him at 5. It's not to the point of Shaun 0 with Saquon, but
a full 0 is crazy.
I think what's also hard is if you take Zay, stacking him with Lamar is very challenging. That's very expensive in terms of getting both of those guys, and you want your team stacks, you want your correlation. It's expensive getting those 2 guys together, but it's a great, it's an awesome stack. So
yeah, I'd be curious to see what the breakdown is of total Zay and Lamar teams once we have all this wrapped up and get some data from Underdog.
The Zay bring back with Nico and CJ, baby. Ooh, give it to me. But I think I'm just bullish on the Ravens, and I'm bullish on Zay Flowers in year 2. Moving on to our next guy, another running back, ADP 58, RB 13. Aidan, you're going back to back. You're in the hot seat. This was your guy last year. I think that you changed your middle name to Aidan James Cook Haller. Why are you fading James Cook this year? He got you there last year. So tell us why you're out on him at ADP this year.
Yeah. So the more that I looked into this, the more I was maybe I shouldn't be as much of a fade as it is. But this is another guy. He's, I've got him at 3% exposure right now, which is likely a little bit too low, but there are a couple things that I just don't like about James Cook, especially in this format. In redraft PPR leagues, this is a guy that I'll probably be targeting more so than best ball. Shaun mentioned ADP is 58, RB 13, just in terms of some of the other guys around him. You've got Pacheco and ETN are just ahead of him, Josh Jacobs as well. And then you've got Joe Mixon, Rachaad White, K9, and David Montgomery behind him. So I actually think the price is, pretty accurately baked in there. Coming off a really productive year, was the running back 11. So, running back 11 last year, they're being priced as 13 right now. Like 1,500 total yards. Super efficient, both on the ground and as a pass catcher. I think it was about an 1,100, 400 split. The biggest knock on him is the touchdowns. Playing alongside Josh Allen is just like, it's like the Jalen Hurts treatment. Like, get inside the 5 yard, like, it's even more so than Jalen Hurts because, Jalen Hurts is like the 1 or 2 yard line. You get Josh Allen inside the 5 or 10 yard line, and he just goes golden retriever brain and is just like, here I go. I'm going to go Josh Allen mode right now. So, on one hand, you can make the argument that he's going to positively regress and, fall into some more touchdowns. Last year, if he fell into closer to, 10 or 12 touchdowns, we're looking at, pretty firmly top 10, even close to top 5 finish in half PPR format. But like, you've got to know your formats. Best ball is so heavily baked into, scoring touchdowns, lots of yards, lots of big weeks. And it's just not something I see with James Cook, just given the kind of lack of touchdowns. I think the usage overall with Brady, once he took over as a play caller, was really good. I think the first couple of weeks were fantastic. Like, if you had James Cook over those, last couple of weeks before playoffs, awesome. Multiple weeks above 15, 20 points at half PPR format, and then kind of fell on his face in the fantasy playoffs, which was total nightmare. 5 points, 4.9 points, 6.7 points. So like the usage was there, but just wasn't really doing anything. This is just expensive for me again. ADP 58. I'm probably not really taking a running back here to start with. Like, you're kind of getting into the dead zone here. Granted, it's best ball, but like, you're kind of getting into that dead zone. I'd kind of rather, start targeting my first quarterback or keep hammering wide receiver. So, I'm more fading Zay than I am James. Like, I'll likely get my exposure up to closer to, in the 5 to 10% range. But I think given where he's priced right now, it's just not really the person I'm trying to target. It's just a little expensive given what I kind of expect his role to be again next year.
Have you considered the fact that Buffalo doesn't have any weapons other than James Cook and Dalton Kincaid?
Curtis Samuel Erasure. How dare you? How dare you, Curtis Samuel Erasure? Come on. Curtis Samuel's nice.
Khalil Shakir, baby. Hop on the train.
Yes, sir.
This is true, but like, it's just going to be the Josh Allen show, I think, again.
Ball's got to go somewhere.
They've also got Ray Davis now.
The Ray Davis
that's
thing
a bigger
is,
red zone back. It's a bigger red zone back, too.
Latavius Murray really sucked.
Sucked.
Because of that, it's still James Cook could. James Cook only played like 50% of the snaps last year.
And he was annoying as hell. He's so good. It's like,
his advanced numbers were great. He was top 10 in rush yards over expected per attempt. He was top 7 in rushing efficiency. He's like a good, not great runner. And I thought he left a ton on the bone in terms of a pass catcher. He dropped like multiple, seam, why do I always fuck this up? Seam stretching touchdowns where he's like running naked, perfect ball placement, and he drops it. I feel like he left a ton of meat on the bone in the reception department. I think it's cool they use him downfield as a receiver. It's not just like check downs to James Cook. Like, they actually get him out in space down the field, which is ultra valuable. Like, but again, from week 11 to week 17, with Joe Brady, he had like one of the most valuable roles in all of fantasy. And I don't really see that changing. Like, he's still dominated on 50% of the snaps. I think Ray Davis is a good player, and he could. What is he going to eat into? Like, James Cook, you know what I mean? James Cook already had the bit time role last year. So I don't know. He was the RB11 game price, the RB13. It feels fair. I do find myself taking tight ends and quarterbacks here. So I get that, but I wouldn't, I think James Cook's a good player. And I do agree with Keegan. Like, it's probably a top 2 weapon in the entire offense. So it's kind of throwing my hands up a little bit there.
You just have to, I don't know, in my perspective, you have to be careful with players that are in like such tight funnel offenses. Like, I can't really tell you what Shakir and Curtis Samuel and Keon Coleman's production is going to be, but I can probably give you a much better idea of what James Cook's is going to be, and probably Dalton Kincaid as well too. And like, as somebody like Coleman gets adjusted to the offense, like maybe they do lean on Cook more as a receiver to try and get the ball moving downfield. I just feel like being attached to Josh Allen is always a good thing, and that can be a bad thing as well too if you're a running back, but still a really good weapon in an offense that is going to score points because Josh Allen's good. So
Yeah.
Moving on to the next guy here. It's a receiver that Aidan and I both really like. Keegan's kind of on an island here. Tell us why you're fading the wide receiver 36, the guy going 59th off the board, Chris Godwin, Keegan.
2 words. Anthony Richardson. There is almost no way when I'm in that draft range that I would rather click on Chris Godwin or James Cook over Anthony Richardson if he's there and available. Like, I'm just never going to do that. Anthony Richardson's like my most drafted quarterback. So this is kind of like a thing where Chris Godwin is placed based off ADP. And also who's right behind him? Kyle Pitts. I've drafted a lot of Kyle Pitts. There's also Joe Mixon and Rachaad White right next to him in this exact same range. And when I think about drafting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this year, I know that they will be without Dave Canales. They brought in somebody that Baker's very familiar with. I think the offense will still resemble something that it was last year, which is great. But that means a lot of Mike Evans. That means a lot of Rachaad White. And in that range of the draft, I just really don't want to draft Chris Godwin. I get that he's going to be back in the slot this year, and like that sounds fascinating to me. I'm so glad that we're getting all kinds of reports that he'll be firmly back in the slot. But like, does that really excite me? Maybe. In the past, he's been really good in that role, but also in the past, they've had different offensive schemes and different offensive structures. Like, I think if we looked at what happened last year, it's a lot of Mike. And Mike scored a lot of touchdowns for them. And it was a lot of Rachaad White. And I don't really think Bucky Irving is going to come in here and steal meaningful touches from Rachaad White. I just find that really hard to believe. And on top of that, if I want exposure to the Buccaneers offense at the wide receiver position, I just dip into Jalen McMillan. He's like my 6th highest drafted player in underdog best ball drafts right now based on exposure. And I hyped up, Jalen McMillan a lot coming out of college when we did our rookie previews coming into the draft, because I think he's personally better than Polk. I think he was very productive in the Washington offense. He was able to kind of like be all around the field. And when he wasn't injured, he was definitely the 2nd best wide receiver on that team to Rome Odunze. So if I want exposure to the Tampa Bay wide receivers, there's a much cheaper option way late in drafts. The players around Chris Godwin make it so hard for you to draft him. Like I said, Anthony Richardson is my most drafted quarterback. If I'm in that range, I'm clicking A-Rich. If it's 2 spots, 3 spots, sometimes 4 above ADP. You can't really talk me into drafting, Calvin Ridley, Jaden Reed, or Chris Godwin, even James Cook, like Aidan just talked about, over Anthony Richardson. I just don't really have any interest in that. And to be honest, I don't even know that Chris Godwin will finish the season or be a Tampa Bay Buccaneer next year. Maybe it's not this year, but maybe it's not next year. Like, they just drafted his replacement. Do we really think that they're going to go all in on Chris Godwin touches this year?
This is where you get me.
Do we?
Everything was great. Like, and then you're like, Jalen McMillan's going to take Chris Godwin's lunch.
Yeah,
that's where I'm
He's
at.
not doing that.
Everything you said was like, damn, that was a really good case.
You
that
had
was a
me for a second.
You had me on the hook, and then you're like, McMillan's taking Godwin's lunch, and I'm like, I don't think that's
I didn't say that.
Damn.
I didn't say that. All I said is, are we really thinking that Chris Godwin is like going to be a future part of the plans in Tampa Bay?
He could be.
Godwin's
Mike Evans is the one
dude.
that's on his way out.
He got the extension. Evans got the extension. I get it. I know what he's saying.
I understand the ADP. Like, it's similar to my argument that I made about James Cook, but Chris Godwin is just so damn consistent, man. He's got, 4 of his last 5 seasons, over 120 targets and 1,000+ yards. It's like just really damn consistent from Chris Godwin. Baker surprised everyone last year in terms of that offense. And to be honest, like, it's just him and Mike Evans. I have no concerns about Jalen McMillan. Cade Otton's Cade Otton. And then, it's kind of no one behind those 2 guys. So, they're both going to see 120+ targets. I think, they're both going to have pretty productive. Like, I'd assume they both eclipse 1,000 yards again. Baker will probably throw for about 4,000, maybe a little less than that, maybe a little more. But I like Godwin. I'm actually really not all that exposed to him. Like, this is, again, like, not really a huge best ball target for me, more of a redraft guy myself. I'm, right around 5% on Chris Godwin. And I think it's kind of to your point again, like, around who else is there, like what I'm building. So it's, I'm not overly exposed to Chris Godwin, but I think, like, the argument for me is easy to make for him at the same time. It's just the board hasn't fallen to me in a way that I've really drafted too much of him yet.
After his wife complained, I think it was like weeks 14 to 18. He was like the wide receiver 6. He went off after his wife was like, "What the fuck is
good,
this,
man?
Like,
He's good."
They legit just weren't throwing him the ball. He was like open, and they're like, "No, Mike Evans Hall of Fame tour." Like that was the whole offense. I mean,
he
it
was
worked.
money in the fantasy playoffs, dude. Yeah, weeks
Godwin was
15,
Godwin's
16,
great.
17, 20.5, 10.9, 15.6. So
yeah, he went off.
Pretty productive.
Yeah, he went off. Like
stretch there.
I get you on structure. I love A-Rich. He's one of my most drafted quarterbacks. The running backs there are pretty solid. Godwin is your wide receiver 4, though. It's pretty sweet if you're doing one of those heavy wide receiver builds. So that's where I end up drafting.
Is it that sweet?
It's pretty sweet.
You just hate him because he's taken away touches from your guy Mike.
I don't know. 5 picks above that is Keenan Allen. Like if you're in that round, and Keenan Allen could be your 4th wide receiver.
I think they're comparable. I think they're comparable.
Xavier Worthy, Rome Odunze, all in this range.
I'm taking Godwin over those last 2.
I like Godwin.
Yeah,
Godwin in the slot,
would
man.
you?
Godwin in the slot in a Sean McVay offense. Godwin in the slot in a Sean McVay offense gets me I get a little tingle, not gonna lie.
We also have to consider the fact that like we're banking on like another fantastic year from Baker. And I'm not saying it can't happen, but like that was some of the best ball Baker Mayfield has played in his entire career.
No Dave Canales.
No slight to Baker.
No Dave Canales.
Contract year.
And I said, they brought in somebody who's very familiar with him, and their offensive environment is going to try and be very similar to what it was last year. But I'll just take Rachaad White if I want a Tampa Bay player in that range. Maybe he's my first or second running back.
I have my second guy, wide receiver 47 off the board, ADP 79. And that is the rookie out of Florida State, Keon Coleman. I'm at like 1% exposure on Coleman. I don't find myself drafting him a ton. And all I have to do is just pull up some of these tweets from the Coach Speak Index about Brandon Beane or this team talking about Keon Coleman. Here are some quotes. This is GM Brandon Beane, April 27th. We'll bring him along. He'll have to learn the offense. We'll see how many spots. Can he just learn the X? Can he learn multiple spots? That may not be right away, but he'll help us out a lot. Okay. That's good. Developmental. Okay. Good to see. Offensive coordinator Joe Brady, May 28th. He has a skill set that we felt like we didn't have in that room, and we'll want to see that continue to evolve. He has the traits you look for and skills you think you can develop. GM Brandon Beane, June 14th. College playbook versus NFL playbook. Big difference. Like anything, he's going to have bumps in the road. He's a rookie. I think we all need to understand that. Does that sound like a guy who should be the wide receiver 47, ADP 79? No. He should be firmly going in the AD Mitchell territory. Like firmly. He should be down in the 115s. Like he has no business as a top 80 pick, in my opinion. Like
I'm not drafting a ton of him, but like the bull case, obviously, with him is like we're looking at like 240 vacated targets tied to Josh Allen. So it's like someone has to step up in this passing attack. Like Kincaid, I'm not saying it's gonna be him,
Curtis Samuel,
but like, yeah, but there is an off chance. Again, I'm not drafting much of him. I'm at 3% on Keon. There is a world where he definitely performs better than his ADP. Like it's pretty cheap, tied to the QB1 in fantasy year after year. So it's like someone's going to step up. Yeah, I'm banking on it being, some combination of Kincaid, Shakir, and Samuel. But it's like Keon's skill set is the most unique out of those 3 plus Keon. So I don't know.
Yeah, they don't have a single player in that offense that can do what Keon Coleman does.
Yeah,
like,
just like
I think you have to consider that it's a possibility that he might not maybe hit home on a ton of yards, but like, what if he just gets busy in the red zone?
That's what I was saying. Like he could walk into 10 touchdowns, and I wouldn't be all that surprised. But yeah, I don't.
It's a possibility.
Yeah,
he just going.
He could play like the Cortland Sutton role and just like score touchdowns, but like just really not doing a whole lot more than that.
It's just way too early. I think he could even break out towards the end of the year. It doesn't hurt that he's playing with Josh Allen too. Like that's a good thing, totally right? Like that's a good thing. I have no interest in pick 80. Like, come on now. That's
a tricky button to click too. I feel like because the popular way to build out your teams right now is you postpone the RB, and like there's a couple in that range that are worth drafting. I like drafting Aaron Jones. I like drafting Najee this year. I like drafting Ramondre even. Kyler Murray, if you've already drafted McBride, like that's another really good pick in that range. Yeah, Jake Ferguson, if you miss out on the elite tight ends, it's a
way
tough
too rich.
bunch of players to be around.
Way too rich.
Way too rich. Way too rich. And his like his historical comps, like I pulled up his profile on RotoViz for like his production, and it's like the
I love
most,
when Shaun pulls these up, and it's always just like the worst
no,
names
no,
you've
no.
ever
It's the
heard.
most yo-yo thing ever. It's T. Higgins, Laquan Treadwell, Michael Thomas, and Cody Latimer. So like this could go either way. Like either
50%, 2 for 2,
So-
2 for 4. I like my odds.
Yeah, I like a coin
ADP
flip. It's better
80?
than most odds I get.
ADP 80. I'm so good. Like, let's get him in the 100s. Like, I'm not taking him over Rashid Shaheed. Are you get the fuck out of here? I'm not even taking him over Josh Palmer. Like, what are we doing? Get him in the 80 Mitchell range, and then I'm all in. But we're fading another rookie here. And this is, I think, Aidan, one of your highest drafted running backs, but Keegan's kind of out on this guy at ADP.
Yeah.
ADP 89, RB 24. It was the first running back off the board in the 2024 draft, and it's none other than Texas rookie Jonathon Brooks for the Carolina Panthers. Why are you out on John Brooks at ADP, Keegan?
Standing on 10 toes. Yeah, John Brooks. Yeah. I'm standing 10 toes down for my earlier in the season dynasty take on Jonathon Brooks. Like it's really simple to me. Here's ACL in November. He's a rookie. He's going to miss valuable camp time, valuable time to get ready for the season. He's going to have a very, very slow rollout to being actually involved in this offense. And what offense does he play for? Somebody answer me that question. What team does Jonathon Brooks play for?
Dave Canales' Carolina Panthers.
What team do we think, as a collective group, will probably be a bottom 3 team in the NFL this year?
I don't know if I'm in on that. I think they could surprise some people.
Thank you, Aidan. All right, 2 for 3. I'll proceed with my case here. The issue with taking a running back like Jonathon Brooks, who is a rookie, is not only is his ACL, still recovering. He's not going to get that touch time to like incorporate himself in the offense. He's got a improved offensive line. I think they did a good job building out the interior. It's going to make the run game a little bit better, and they won't put so much pressure on Bryce Young. But it goes against the best ball idea of like you want late season bloomers, like people who can really help your roster. But do you really want to take? Do you really want to take 4 weeks off? Like I'm drafting running backs so late in my like best ball builds, and I can't rely on Jonathon Brooks to be my number 2, my number 3 running back. Like at that point, I need some production from him, or at least whatever I'm taking in that range. James Conner is, I think, a very great pick in this range. There's Jalen Warren. Zach Moss is a little bit behind that. Zach Moss is going to probably start week 1, be ready to go in a very potent offense. I just find it so hard to click on a guy who is still recovering from an ACL tear. Like, why are we forgetting this? There are very few athletes, especially running backs, who come back and make an immediate impact. Like, Breece Hall is a freak of nature and a much better running back than Jonathon Brooks. And look how slow he got started.
That's fine. I think that's baked into his ADP. If he's not coming off a torn ACL, he's probably like a top 60.
Would we really? Where would we be drafting it if he wasn't coming off an ACL tear?
Like probably top 60, like top 50.
Yeah, I was gonna say like a good 10 running backs higher, probably.
Yeah,
he was awesome at Texas.
He was really good.
He was awesome at Texas pre-tear. And what he's running back like 20? What I would say 26.
He's running back 24, so he's right there at the RB2 range.
I think that's baked in. I think you've kind of got to go hero RB hero RB to start your draft if you're going to draft Jonathon Brooks. Like you can't bank on him being your RB1. Like there's just no way you can do that. I think if you take one of those top 5, top 8 running backs, you take him as your second or third, and then maybe you go kind of like some light guys in the back, to kind of piece it together, Khalil Herbert type guys to just like fill in the blanks until he's ramped up around week 6 or so. I think that's fine. I think there's a ton of upside. Like we loved the way that Rachaad White was used in that Tampa Bay offense. I think if he's able to regain that form that he looked like at Texas, this was definitely the best running back in that class. If he's not tearing his ACL, he's going probably significantly higher in the NFL draft and in other formats. So I get it.
What week of the NFL season is November? Is that like week 10?
November?
Yeah, November. It's like week 10, week 9.
It's a 9-month recovery, and most people are, if it's a clean ACL tear, a lot of people are coming back way faster. Like
It's a pretty
kind of
standard procedure. Like it's pretty
He's
nuts
young.
how like common it is. Yeah, he's young.
It doesn't matter if it's common or not. It still affects
For
your production.
No,
explosive.
It still
For
affects who you are
I
as a running
completely
back.
agree.
Like,
Yeah. But
I'm not going to be surprised if he has some late season peak games, and like that might be helpful in best ball, but your team might not make it there without him like actually contributing at an elite level or somewhat elite level in the first 5 weeks. Your team could be dead by then. Your teams die so fast in your best ball pod. Like you need production in the middle of the season. So like you need to balance out your roster. And maybe you do that with a heavy wide receiver build. You have an elite quarterback, elite tight end. You have a hero running back who's carrying you the way through, but you got to start 2 of them. Two of them need to be scoring touchdowns.
You take like somebody like Devin Singletary and you pair him with Jonathon Brooks, like somebody you know is going to get 15 touches in a game, just to give you that steady production. And then towards the end of the season, Jonathon Brooks is probably going to be the bell cow. He's going to get a shit ton of receptions. Bryce Young's going to be checking it down at will. And who do you think's better, Rachaad White or Jonathon Brooks? As a talent,
Jonathon Brooks.
Jonathon Brooks.
Like the college profile and the college tape is Jonathon Brooks. Like
Dave
RB1 in
Canales,
this class versus it was like much different.
Dave Canales had Rachaad White as a top 6 running back last year. And that offensive line was terrible in Tampa.
Yeah.
Much better offensive line this year with the Panthers. Still bad, but much more improved with their investments. I get it. I get the
fade.
fear of the early
Happy to be
season
wrong about
production, but
Panthers
I get it.
are gonna suck. I'm with you there. And bad teams typically don't support a good running back, but like
ACL too. I get it.
and
I
like
get it.
the red flags are right in front of us, but I'm like, what?
Dude, we just
Could be
started
kinda
this
fun.
conversation. We started this conversation at the beginning of this episode talking about Saqoun Barkley and how hard it was and how many touches it took for him to hit home on the New York Giants. I'm not going to sit here and think that Jonathon Brooks is better than somebody like Saqoun Barkley. Like it takes a lot. It takes a special talent to hit home on really bad offenses. Like we have to consider that the Panthers might just be bad again this year. And that's okay. It's like they're rebuilding. But like it takes a really good running back to do what people like Brees or Saquon do on like subpar teams, especially with offensive lines that are still trying to figure it out. So am I thinking Jonathon Brooks is Saquon? I don't think so.
You need the receptions. You just need them. So if he's going to get the garbage time dump offs, those are key. And even though it's half point, you still need them. Like it's still huge.
That's
but
fair.
Yeah, that was a sobering
He
take.
might burn me at the end of the season. Like
that was a sobering take on Jonathon Brooks. It definitely was. I think that's the one
part I get.
I mean,
yeah, I'm probably a little too exposed. I'm sitting like 15. He's probably back to a dozen, maybe 10.
I think if something like this burns me too, like I'll be happy to be like okay about it, just because it's going to take a special type of team construction, and you're going to have to bake not only his injury in, but you're going to have to like consider your entire running back construction around the fact that he might not be viable for the first couple weeks of the season, and you could be dead by then. So something I want to avoid.
I've got some good Jonathon Brooks teams. I don't think you'll be dead. No, you do have to pair him with a running back you know is going to get run in the first half of the season. You just have to do that. But
yeah, no,
that's it. That's it. Those are the 6 guys that we refused to draft, which is very clearly all of us are just very mixed on this group of 6 guys. There was really no consensus.
I don't think we had one. I don't think we had one that there's consensus on that.
Yeah, I think we were all kind of out on Keon Coleman. I think that was that one was
actually pretty clean. That was a pretty clean cut. Yeah, no, that's true.
You see that he didn't know how to sign his contract?
Oh my God. He said, do I put my autograph name or my full name? I was like, holy shit. Holy shit.
Someone said,
dude, that guy's somebody who just cares about football. That's all I care about.
It's kind of the guy I want on my team. It's just catch ball. It's just crazy.
He doesn't know how to sign things. He just knows how to catch footballs, run routes, and score touchdowns. I'm in.
All right, boys. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And until next time.